All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the third session of Michigan School Meals CEP update, and the session is for sponsors not currently participating in CEP. So that means you don't have any CEP sites and are curious if you have any eligible, and if so, how to add them in. My name is Natalie Mickelson, and I'm joined today by Sarah Harmon and Caitlin Wood, helping with this last session of the day. So the chat is open, the Q&A is open. Please drop your questions in there and hopefully we'll get through them in the presentation. If not, we'll cycle them in as we go through. So our agenda, we're going to talk about the Michigan School Meals Program, including program requirements, who is eligible for it, and then what your next steps are. Again, this is focused towards sponsors not participating in CEP. So what are the CEP basics? What is the program? Identified student percentage is a term specific to CEP. We're going to talk about that and how it relates to eligibility for the program. How to know if you have eligible sites, how to elect for the program. We're going to compare applications and forms. So if you do have eligible sites, how do we use those and when? And then where are resources on the website? We're going to talk about claims and what they'll look like with Michigan School Meals and how reimbursement will work. And then we're going to do an application and website demo, kind of walking through resources we have available to you. So program requirements for the Michigan School Meals Program are that you must participate in both National School Lunch and School Breakfast. We do have some sponsors out there with a low free and reduced eligibility, and they're not participating in breakfast because they're not required. But if you opt into this program, you do need to serve both breakfast and lunch. We need to adopt the community eligibility provision to maximize federal reimbursement, which is why we're here today. And then collect relevant family income information. So this might be a school meals application if you're traditional claiming. It might be an education benefit form if you're a CEP school. We also need to write off outstanding student meal negative balances. All right, who's eligible for Michigan School Meals? So meals served in public school districts, public school academies, and intermediate school districts can participate. And this includes pre-kindergarten or tuition-based preschool programs. So we might have some 3-year-olds that turn 4 September 1st or December 1st, depending on the district. They would be part of that 4-year-old program. Kindergarten through grade 12, and then special ed programs up to age 26. So what are my next steps? If you are not yet CEP, we think you're going to fall into one of 3 situations. District-wide CEP, where maybe all of your buildings are eligible, but you haven't participated up until now. Your partial CEP, so where some CEP buildings or some of your sites are going to be CEP and some are going to be traditional claim. Or you're not CEP. We're going to talk about the spring data posting and where to find your information. And you'll see that none of your sites are eligible. And then we'll walk through how to complete the coordinated application to opt into Michigan School Meals, how to complete the CEP election, so where that is in the application. We'll walk through how to edit the CEP page within the application, and then again, talk through applications or education benefits forms. So CEP basics, what CEP is in its traditional sense is that it allows high poverty schools to provide free breakfast and lunch to all students. This is going to, Michigan School Meals this year will provide free breakfast and lunch to all students, but CEP is the original program for this. And it's going to run behind the scenes in your application. The claim for reimbursement is different. There's a few other different aspects that we'll talk about today. Eligibility and reimbursement is based on the percentage of identified students, and we call this the ISP. Any school or district can participate in CEP if one or more of its buildings has an ISP of 40% or greater. And this is looking at students certified for free meals without an application. If you're CEP, you're no longer going to collect school meals applications this year. You're going to switch to collecting education benefits forms. They were previously called household information reports, and I forgot to update it here. You're also going to continue in either program. You're going to continue to run the direct certification report and extend eligibility throughout the school year. So identified student percentage. This is based on April 1st enrollment. That's how the federal program for CEP is set up. In Michigan, what we do is we use the spring general collection because that certifies in April. And that data is what we post to the website, and we'll look at it in a moment, and feeds into the coordinated application. To calculate the identified student percentage, a school is looking at all of the meals who are eligible, free eligible through direct certification or the means below. And then you're going to divide that by the student enrollment. So eligible students divided by enrollment, we're looking for that to be above 40%. Students are considered identified students or categorically eligible for CEP if they are directly certified through SNAP, temporary assistance, or Medicaid free. They could also qualify if they live in a household where a child's directly certified and that benefit is extended. We'll talk about how you might be able to add that in. If you have any families that are recipients of the food distribution program on Indian reservations, that can be factored in. And then students experiencing homelessness, migrant, runaway, enrolled in Head Start, or directly certified foster. These are also categorical eligibilities. They are individual to that student. So directly certified foster, that's a free benefit, but it's just for that individual student. It doesn't extend to the rest of the household. All right, so do I have eligible sites? I have some screenshots from this school level CEP information. It's posted on the CEP resources page. It looks like, nope, that's a different link in the chat. I'm not sure if the link was put in the chat. But I'm going to walk through how to see if your sites are eligible. So this is like a 50-page PDF document. I recommend doing Control F and typing in the name of your district, and that's going to jump you right to the page where your building is. So in this example, I can see the identified student percentage here for the alt ed is at 82%. For the high school, it's at 46. For the middle, it's at 51. And for the elementary, it's at 60. These buildings all have an identified student percentage higher than 40%, and they can participate in CEP. If you take the identified student percentage and multiply that by 1.6, that would tell you the individual site eligibility. So the middle school, if it were to be on its own, that 51.66 times 1.6, the CEP multiplier, it means that site would receive 82.7% free reimbursement, free federal reimbursement for their meals. The difference of that is paid federal reimbursement. What Michigan School Meals would do is make up the difference on top of that paid reimbursement, so all the meals are reimbursed at the free rate. We'll talk more about the claiming part of it. Something that you can do with CEP is group the eligibility. So if you add up the total enrollment for all of those sites, and you add up the eligible students for all of those sites, we can get the grouped identified student percentage. So 480 was the eligible students, 875 is the total enrollment. The grouped ISP is 54.86. and times that CEP multiplier is 87.6. So that would be that new percentage. All of these sites are eligible to participate in CEP. I know this looks kind of overwhelming now. I have a couple more examples and we'll continue to talk through it. So the identified student percentage is a column within the spring data posting. It's also a column within the CEP page. So I will demonstrate that in the application. All right, here's an example of someone who emailed today asking, do we have any eligible buildings? You know, are we going to participate in CEP? So I searched their district, and when you go down through the list, none of the sites are at that 40% threshold. So none of these sites are eligible to participate in CEP. You have to be at that 40%. So if you go in and look at your school district here and all of the sites are below 40, you're going to stay in traditional free reduced paid claiming. All right, so how do I apply? I'm going to walk through a demonstration of this once we get into the application. But question number 3 on the sponsor details page is where you would answer, yes, I want to participate in CEP. You need to be in an editing status of your application. So if your application is already approved and you want to participate, you would need to start an amendment. If you're still going back and forth with your analyst and your application's not yet approved, you're doing modifications. Once it's sent back to you, you can go into sponsor details, change status to do a modification, and you can add that in. Please make note when you're doing an amendment or an application, if you just started CEP, say very specifically in there, you know, I opted into CEP or I opted into Michigan school meals. It's really helpful for us if you detail specifically what you changed. Let us know if you went through and added in a second health inspection. Maybe you submitted your application before and you didn't have that. Being specific in your amendments or notes helps to make sure we have the right people approving it and just keeps the process moving fast. All right, on the sponsor details page, this is a screenshot of what the Michigan school meals questions are going to be. So these are not in the application yet. We hope to have them in the next week or so. But if you look at your application today, you're not going to see these. So question number 7 is where you answer yes or no for Michigan school meals. It's going to display for all sponsors participating in the National School Lunch Program, but it's only going to allow you to answer yes for public school districts, public school academies, and intermediate school districts. If you're a non-public school answering yes, you're going to get an error message. For number 8, this is where you would enter in the amount of student negative meal balances and upload documentation to support that amount. Number 9 is for showing that negative student balances were written off. And if there was negative balance to write off, you'd say yes. If you didn't have any, you'd answer NA, and upload documentation if you had negative balances to write off. Okay, so applications versus forms. If you are going to be a traditional claiming school, you're going to stick with a version of the school meals application. I'm going to show you towards the end the school meals, Michigan School Meals website, which is still in edit mode, but we do have versions of the application and its related materials for Michigan school meals. So if you already have out the school meals and summer EBT application, I know people print those and distribute them, get them online right at that July 1st date. It's okay to use those. If you have those collected and processed and you've made a determination, you can continue to use those as they come in. As students return those once we're back to school or they get mailed in, you can keep using those. But if you haven't printed yet or do another round of printing, these resources are going to be helpful for you. So an application is one way to qualify students for a meal eligibility if you're traditional claiming. Another way continues to be direct certification. So it's important to continue running direct certification because that is a state level match for student eligibility. It means you don't need an application from that family, and that time of processing an application or just the back and forth of why do we still need them. Other categorical eligibility, so continue to work with your McKinney-Vento liaisons or homeless liaisons to qualify students through those other means and make sure they're receiving the benefits that they're eligible for. And then I also want to make a note here about CACFP SNAC. If you are a CEP building, CACFP SNAC is not a part of that program. The Child and Adult Care Food Program is one federal program. National School Lunch and Breakfast is a completely different program. And CEP is under that National School Lunch and Breakfast umbrella. So CEP eligibility doesn't extend to that CACFP SNAC. You do need to make sure those students have an eligibility determination of free, reduced, or paid for those snacks. For those CACFP kids, the families can just do the applications. You don't need to ask them for both. If they have other siblings that aren't CACFP but are in that CEP building, that one form would qualify that family for that benefit. All right, education benefits forms. CEP schools are not allowed to use school meals applications. So if you look at your numbers and find, wow, we're eligible in CEP for all of our buildings, you're going to switch to the education benefit form. Like with applications, students that are directly certified don't need an education benefits form. So it incentivizes for you continuing to run the direct certification list, extending benefits because you don't need forms from families if it's on there. There are two versions of the education benefit form. One shows annual income ranges. So a family of 3 would go to the 3 line and check the box and then go across the page and say, indicate what range they fall in. And the ranges align with free, reduced, and paid benefits. So it's easy to approve. Families are generally more inclined to complete kind of that survey style report. There's another version that families write in their household size and their household income amount. That's another one that you can use. You can choose from either of the two forms. A lot of times people make a choice based on what works with their internal systems to best process that form and keep the data flowing. So that's why we have options available for you. You're welcome to make an online version of the form. You do just want to make sure that that data is a secure transaction and it collects a signature from the household member signing the form. We have translations available for the letter to households, the household size and income education benefit form, and the sharing information form. Those are all translated into 12 different languages in addition to English. If you'd like those, please email the MDE School Nutrition mailbox, letting us know the forms and languages that you would like. We do also share the English version of that. So if you need to edit a form, you know how they align and can make sure you're doing that piece. Now, when we have families with students in both a CEP and a non-CEP building, those families should complete the more restrictive form, which is the school meals application. We don't need those households to do both forms. This works the same as for CACFP students. If you have a CEP building where snacks are CACFP, do the school meals application. The education benefit form does not qualify students in non-CEP buildings for school meals. We very intentionally removed the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. We don't collect income by household member. We tried to strip it down as much as we could to encourage families to complete that form. So if a family with students in a non-CEP building and a CEP building, if they complete the education benefits form, that CEP form, and it's a free determination, that free determination does not qualify that non-CEP student for meals because the form doesn't have last four digits of Social Security. It doesn't have income amount by the household member. So school meals applications for non-CEP buildings. I have some resources available for that. All right. Why do we need these forms? So why do we need forms and applications when meals are free? You might be asking that as a school nutrition employee or a business manager. Parents are certainly asking this. So the way that Michigan does educational funding, these forms collect information needed to ensure that your schools and districts continue to receive the state and federal funding for educational programs. So the total counts of eligible students is used to determine funding amounts available to a school. So the more forms returned, the better. The more forms returned, the more likely your funding is going to stay stable. And the more forms or the more school meals applications returned, the more federal reimbursement that building is going to receive for school meals, reducing the cost of the Michigan school meals program. All right, where are resources available on the website? I'm going to walk through all of these pages once we get to the demonstration part. But the CEP resources page is where the spring data posting is. I believe Caitlin's already put that in the chat. The CEP forms and instructions page has the CEP letter to households, the education benefit form, the sharing information form, and the partial CEP guide. What form do I fill out for households? I'll show that document. For direct certification, the CEP direct certification letters are on the direct certification page. I'll show you where all of that is linked out. The Michigan School Meals direct certification letters have been revamped with language specific to meals are free. On the Michigan School Meals page, there's links to these 3 pages. There's also that modified version, an application for summer EBT and education benefits for the Michigan School Meals program, an updated letter to households, updated letters that go along with that. So the eligibility determination, direct cert determinations, how to complete the form with Michigan School Meals language. So letting families know that meals are free, but we still need these forms for other information. We also have some flyers. So a don't scrap the app flyer, just another resource putting it out to parents. Why do we need this? It's more than the form flyer. That's a CEP version of it. And we have social media posts for both CEP and non-CEP. All right. Sarah Harmon's going to take over now and talk about claims and point of service.
All right. Thank you, Natalie. Great job. A lot of questions coming in. I love it. So we're answering them, and we'll answer some live after the demo or during the demo. So we all know that point of service is very important. And I want you just to remember that as we go through this system. Schools that are not in CEP or traditional claim schools still must count claims based on eligibility of that student receiving the meal, even though all the students are going to receive a free meal through the Michigan School Meals Program. Students will receive that meal at no charge, but must be correctly listed on the meal eligibility rosters or your electronic POS systems according to their actual school meal eligibility status of that free, reduced price, or paid. Meals served to these students must be correctly claimed as free, reduced price, or paid to receive that federal and state reimbursement. Schools that opt into CEP may use a CEP meal count sheet to count the total reimbursable meals served. Although the CEP meal count sheets are allowed for total counts for CEP schools, all schools must have proper controls in place to ensure that students are not being counted and claimed for more than one reimbursable breakfast and one reimbursable lunch per day. MDE always recommends schools continue to use electronic POS systems, even in CEP schools. So remember that the legislation is for one free breakfast and one free lunch per day for the Michigan School Meals Program. So that doesn't include second meals or a la carte items. So you're going to have, if you're going to serve those things, you're going to have a separate policy or procedure for that. And remember that meals that are served to teachers or staff must continue to be charged according to the federal regulations, and they're not eligible for that state reimbursement of the Michigan school meals. On the next slide, you'll see that we'll show a picture of what the claims are going to look like as CEP, but you're going to continue to file your claims in Mind 2.0 and Mind Legacy, just like you always have. The submission process is the same forward facing to you. So you're always going to continue to claim in that free, that reduced price, or that paid category. Everyone is not just going to free just because it's the Michigan school meals. We still have to have them claimed in the correct category to give you the federal reimbursement rate and then the difference from the state reimbursement rate. Mind is going to calculate those reimbursement rates for you behind the scenes so you don't have to do that. And we're asking that all sponsors that are going to participate in the Michigan School Meals Program for the month of July, which technically started July 20th, that's when it was signed into law from Governor Whitmer. We're asking you not to submit a claim until you get further communication from us. We're still working out the kinks for the program for the month of July, and we want it to be correct, and we don't want you to have to go in and make an amendment. So on this page, you can see this is what a CEP claim would look like. It's a little different than claiming in each category of that free, reduced, paid. But if you have any CEP eligible schools or your district eligible, you're only going to need 3 items to claim for. So as you can see in the first column, the arrows pointing towards total servings. You're going to need the total number of servings for breakfast and the total number of servings for lunch for each site, or each site that would be CEP. Then you're going to go to that second arrow where it says days served, and you're going to enter the number of days served for that site for breakfast and for lunch, because those could be a little different if you do have a half day here or there at the beginning or the end of the school year or in between. The last number that you're going to enter is that student enrollment as of the last day of service for that month. And that could fluctuate every month, or it might be the same. Something I want to bring your attention to is right next to their student enrollment is the percentage of meals claimed as free. That's going to be your percentage that is calculated in the application that will carry over. That means that in this example, that 75.9% of all meals that they claim are going to be reimbursed at the free rate. Now, that means the other 24.1% is going to be reimbursed at the free rate, but by the state, because they will get the federal paid rate, and then the state will pay that difference of those meals. If we go on to the next page, you can see that it is a sample of what the claim status report is hopefully going to look like. I apologize, this is busy. It does show amended in here just because we were doing a lot of testing. So previously in your claims, you would see paid, reduced, free, severe need, those types of things. It's now going to be a little different. So it's easier for everyone to understand where those reimbursements are coming from. So if it's a regular payment of paid, reduced, or free, it's going to be federal paid, federal reduced, federal free, severe need, and all. So you'll be able to decipher those federal reimbursement rates. So the next thing that's new is going to be Michigan funding. That's that state payment. So it's going to be Michigan paid, Michigan reduced, Michigan paid severe need, or Michigan reduced severe need. And what that is that's the difference between the federal rate and the state rate to make you go back up to that federal free rate of those meals. So for instance, if you had, I think lunch is going to be, a paid lunch is 50 cents, but the federal Free lunch is going to be like $4.35 with severe need. The difference between that, I think, is about $3.85. So that's what would show up under Michigan paid severe need. That difference in amount times that number of meals. So hopefully this will be clear for everyone. You know that certain amounts are going to come from the federal side and certain amounts are going to come from the state side in your claim status report. And we can always help you with that. Hopefully this will be ready soon for the July claim, and just again, wait for our recommendation on when to be able to submit that claim if you need Michigan school meals claim for July. I think now Natalie is going to do a little demo for you.
And Natalie, really quick before you start the demo, or as you're getting it ready, we had a couple questions that I think would be nice to clarify because a lot of people had similar questions. So one of them was about if I have 2 buildings who are eligible for CEP and 3 that are not, do I have to opt in for those 2 buildings? And that answer is, it depends, which I know is confusing. But Natalie and I are both here to help and look at that data individually for your district, because it's not necessarily the same. Maybe one of those sites doesn't claim meals, even though they're eligible. Technically, you don't actually claim meals there. Or it's an elementary and your other elementary is not eligible. Maybe it doesn't make sense to opt in for one and not the other. So it really depends. It's case by case. And Natalie and I will take individual look at your district if you would like us to. So feel free to email if you have those kind of questions. And then another one came in about they listed 3 different eligibilities for their buildings. One was near eligible and the other 2 were eligible. And one thing with CEP that we can do is group them all together to make more buildings eligible. So in that case, all buildings will be eligible and you can do district-wide CEP. And the reason that that is such a benefit for this year is it's a lot easier to explain the education benefit form if all your buildings are free and the Michigan school meals are free. It just kind of makes communication a little bit easier. It also eliminates all collecting of applications. You still have to collect the benefit form, but as Natalie went over, it's a lot more simplified. There's less on there. No social security number, no adult signature. There's just a little bit less, it's less invasive. And then you also would eliminate verification if you're able to do district-wide. So that's another thing Natalie and I can do is help you look at your district numbers, group them as much as possible and see if we can pull in some of those buildings that look like they're maybe not eligible or somewhere in that 30% range. And we might be able to pull them up because another building's at 70% or something like that. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this page. Natalie's going to give some demonstrations, but we can group them strategically. We can look at different buildings and different options. The ideal goal is to bring as many people, as many districts into CEP as possible to kind of eliminate some of those application verification headaches that come when all meals are free in Michigan, but they're technically not all free in the federal reimbursement. Like Sarah just went over, you'd still do free reduced paid. So it is confusing, but we can walk you through it and help you and hopefully try to make sense of that. Okay, thanks, Natalie.
Okay. So within that piece, Caitlin just said a lot. One thing I caught, education benefit forms do have adult signature. It doesn't break down the household income by person. So they don't have last 4 digits of social security and they don't break down the income by household member. They do require a signature. All right, so the demo, I've seen a lot of questions come through and I think we're going to answer pieces for this. Our emails are going to be on the last slide. We will provide that. So I got caught again doing a demonstration with someone that's on the call. So thank you, Ithaca, for being my example today. I'm going to demonstrate an application that is submitted right now. A lot of you have an application submitted. Maybe it's approved, maybe you've submitted modifications. So the application doesn't appear in your tasks. How to find it, there's 2 different ways. We do have a handy dandy recent documents tab now available in the coordinated application. This is a user that has access to a lot of different MDE grants and applications. So they have a longer list here. I had just searched it while testing, but it wasn't there at the top. So another way to find it is going into applications. And in the search criteria, I find that less is more here. I wouldn't recommend putting in a document number or searching a status. Fiscal year is good, 2024. And then if you want to go through into the child nutrition cluster here and select coordinated application, you can. And then we'll go here into the approved app. Now, this sponsor is not participating in CEP, but they know that they're eligible now and they need to opt in. So we're going to scroll down and amend the application. If you were partial CEP and we're just going to be adding insights, you wouldn't need to amend it because the CEP page can edit in any status. But because there wasn't a CEP page yet, we need to change status. So we're going to go to sponsor details. And then for question number 3, we're going to select yes, I want to participate in CEP. Now there's people on the call today that are going to look at their data and see we're not eligible for CEP. If you don't have any eligible sites, you are not editing your application to do this step. You are only editing your application to do this step, number 3, if you have eligible CEP sites and are going to opt into the program. However, if you're going to opt into the Michigan School Meals Program, there is an additional step. Questions 7, 8, and 9 are going to add here once they're available. So there will need to be an amendment or a modification or a change to your application at some point. So that's all I wanted to change now. I'm going to save the page. While it's saving, we just had a question about, has the identified student percentage or the CEP threshold always been 40%? Since the beginning of CEP, yes, it has been. I think 2012 was maybe the first year. And Michigan was a pilot state for it, and 40% has been the threshold. There is a proposed rule to lower that threshold to 25%. It's not a final rule yet, but we're hopeful that that's going to come through this year. All right, so CEP site selection is going to be available now. And this is what a page looks like when you just open it up. Nothing's participating. And as I hover here, I get that red circle. I can't change statuses up here. And the data is all 0. So it's kind of overwhelming at first. But what you're going to do is you're going to click edit for each site and open them up and the data will load. If your application kind of looks like this with the open boxes and it's zeros, just toggle back and forth on save and edit and that data will load. The exception to this is early childhood buildings and non-public schools. Those are not going to have data. That's a manual process to get data there. So if you run into that, email Caitlin or I and we can walk you through that process. All right, I'm going to save these now. We're going to just look at the individual site eligibility. So on its own, Ithaca High School is at 33.8 ISP. They're not eligible to participate on their own, but these two elementaries are. They're both above that 40% threshold. Now and this is where Caitlin and I can really help you. You can play around in the application if you want. The application operates pretty quickly and it'll do the math. But when you email Caitlin and I, we'll take a look at your application. What sites do you have? And we're going to play around with your grouping to see if we were to lump the sites together, can everyone be eligible? So I'm going to group the sites. And in order to group this, all of the sites need to be open in this edit mode. So if I were to save this here and then try to add this site or to group A, nothing's going to happen. So in order to add sites to a group, all of that group needs to be open. But I'm going to group the sites all here into group A. And the system's going to do the math for adding the site enrollment and adding the eligible students. I only need to save one site and it's going to save the whole group. And then I can see now that grouped identified student percentage just squeaked over the line of 40%. And this district's eligible to participate in CEP district-wide. So they might not be comfortable normally to operate with only 65% free reimbursement, free federal reimbursement. Districts do, but not everyone's comfortable with that, and that's okay. But with Michigan school meals, the state's going to make up the difference in that amount. So all meals will be reimbursed at the free rate. And it makes this doable for this district. The paperwork is going to be easier. All of these families can complete the education benefits form. They'll just use that one form for their families. If this district had already distributed school meals applications, that's okay. Just switch over the education benefits forms. You can use those determinations that you already have. So this application is in edit mode. Don't stop here. We need to click submit. And then this is the point that you want to get to. Your sites are all eligible and the application is submitted, and then MDE will review it. We can't go to review or approve until the application was submitted. There is some error handling in here. If I were to have tried to submit earlier, I'm just going to remove the high school. I don't have a submit button right now when these sites are in edit mode. This isn't the option to submit. It displays over here. So while anything has these editable text boxes, you can't submit the page. You also can't submit the page if any sites or groups of sites are below 40%. So when I try to submit now, it's going to display an error that the site ISPs need to be greater than 40%. So if we qualify for CEP, is it effective for a number of years? So the CEP page is built within the coordinated application, which you need to complete annually. But the CEP application is a 4-year process. So once Ithaca applies for CEP, they could stay on this. It's eligible, or it's effective July 1st, 2023, and it goes until June 30th, 2027. However, I recommend that districts who are below that 100% free claiming magic area, look at your numbers every single year. Hopefully you find that this page wasn't too burdensome to click around in. And, even if you just went up to 66%, it increases your federal reimbursement for your sites, and it starts a new 4-year cycle. So you don't need to wait until those 4 years run out to reapply for the program. All right. So those are some CEP application basics. I'm going to now take a look at some of the resources online with you. So this is on the Michigan School Meals page. And again, this is still undergoing maintenance. We know that some links open wrong. We know that some links open with an error. We have people actively working on it and hope to have all the kinks worked out by tomorrow. So please be patient with us as we're going through those changes. Where to find this? It's on the Health and Nutrition Services page. It's the first button here. So Michigan School Meals. And we're going to go into the resources for schools. So this first cluster is resources for CEP districts or schools. So if you're CEP in all of your buildings, you might choose to use this. It's more than the form flyer, and it talks about the education benefits form and why you should complete it. There's social media posts that say education benefit form. This link goes to the CEP forms and resources page that has the CEP letter to households. It has the 2 versions of the education benefit form. It has the sharing information with other programs and the partial Oh, my screen just went black. So give me a moment here. And it has this partial CEP guide for households. This is a new resource this year that was shared with us by a food service director that had created it in their district to explain to families partial CEP. So in this first section, you'd list all of your CEP buildings. In the second one, you'd list your non-CEP buildings. And then here you'd put in the links for where online parents could find the form, or if they want paper forms, where they would be. For that non-CEP flow, you would direct them to the application and where those forms are available online or in person. If families have children in both the CEP and the non-CEP school, the flow chart directs them to the application. So this is a resource that you can customize and adapt. It doesn't have the Michigan school meals name for the application. I can work on an updated one for that. But this is editable, so you can make those adjustments there. The sharing information form, we've had some questions about this. These forms are also editable, both the CEP version and the application version, where you can edit the programs you have at your buildings. So if you don't have holiday support, you can delete it. If you don't have programs with school supplies, you can delete it. If you have a specialized program at your district that families know the name of and you want to make them aware of it, you can add that in. Oh gosh. Bear with me here, trying to make the text still visible. We have the CEP count forms and the income eligibility guides for schools. For those of you that haven't seen an education benefit form, I can show that quickly. Students or families write in their students' names. If they have a case number, they can enter that in. And if they have a household of 3, they would check that box and then go through and say, our income falls in this range, or this range. And these align with the free, reduced, and paid columns of the income eligibility guidelines. So it's really quick to approve. And this kind of survey style, CEP schools have had a positive response to this, saying that families, feel pretty comfortable completing it. And then there's related instructions. There's and the letter to households was on the CEP page. On this form, we have resources for traditional claim schools. So a letter to households, why do we still need to complete this form? All right, notice how this is opening in SharePoint. It's not opening up for you guys currently, but this is what it will look like. The top section says how that educational funding benefits your district. How do we use that? If you want to add in or edit things there, you can. All these highlighted sections are things that the district should complete with your name, your letterhead, your contact information. Again, how these programs might benefit families. If you don't have holiday support, you can delete that. If you have other benefits, you can add that in. This is kind of a loop around to that sharing information form. If you don't do the sharing information form, maybe you would edit that out down here. We have both for the CEP forms and the application forms, just kind of flyers, alerting parents, explaining why we want that information still. And though it's not attached to meals, there still is importance to that documentation. We have social media posts that are templates kind of just to be starters. You can post on Facebook or use your robocalls or newsletters to get these pieces out. That link might not have opened either because it's in SharePoint. We're working on those. This is the packet for student eligibility, and these have been modified, talking about how meals are free, but we do still need the information. So it's okay if you've printed documents and sent those out, but if you're reprinting or want to modify stuff or update your websites, these resources are available with that Michigan School Meals Program branding and edits. We have new direct certification letters. So they explain that you do qualify for, SNAP or temporary assistance. You do qualify for Medicaid reduced. The Medicaid reduced one lets them know they could still fill out that application if they wanted to loop it around. But again, this has just the Michigan School Meals updates. If you have a non-public school alternate agreement, they would not fall into the Michigan School Meals Program. You'd still want to use these prototypes for them without that Michigan School Meals branding. One other thing I wanted to point out about the application while I'm thinking about it. So after you opt into Michigan School Meals, there's going to be a column that's added on this page that says Michigan School Meals, and you'll have yeses or nos in there. You'll want to make sure that your sites, all of your school sites that are eligible and should be eligible to participate in the program, have that yes there. If you had a non-public school alternate agreement, they can still participate in National School Lunch Program. They're just not going to get that state match. So you would see a no for that site, but they'd be yes for National School Lunch, yes for CACFP or summer if they were participating in there. But that's another spot to keep an eye on. And we're going to have a resource available with how to modify your application for that school meals opt-in, what type of documentation we want to see for the bad debt and negative balance, and then taking a look at this page. We'll click to our emails just so everyone has time to see that. We've had a few requests for that. I don't know if Caitlin or Sarah want to chime in with questions. I'm going to take a look at the chat here.
We did have one question that just came in that was interesting too, that I thought everyone would benefit from hearing. So the question was, what happens if a household doesn't fill out a education benefits form? So your district-wide CEP, you send the forms out and you have some households who don't respond. You basically would handle it the same way you handle a application collection. So you have some households who just won't send back their application. You mark them as paid. In this instance, you just wouldn't mark that student as free or reduced. And the reason for this is these forms are to help with Title I funding, state aid funding, other education benefits for the district. They're just no longer connected to school meals. When you normally go CEP, and then now with Michigan School Meals, we tried to reword both of them so that it helps explain that. But you still need to collect these as a way to have that economically disadvantaged student count in your district, and it goes for all those other benefits. So you would handle it the same way you do an application if they don't submit that. You can try to keep collecting them as much as possible, but you also know sometimes people just don't return them, and so you can just mark them as the paid option, and they won't count towards that economically disadvantaged number.
Okay, so some questions. Have these letters been checked for accessibility? Yes, we can't post anything that isn't accessible, so they should be good. If not, they get taken down from our website. So that's at times why it takes us a while to get things up there, because our PowerPoints, any resource that we post has to be ADA compliant. So for alternate agreements, what I had mentioned there, if you have an alternate agreement with a school district, because sometimes there's one public school with an alternate agreement with another public school. That other school can participate in the Michigan School Meals Program, or maybe you have an ISD or RESA site, that's okay too. But if you have alternate agreements with non-public schools, they're not eligible for Michigan School Meals. So you can continue to have that alternate agreement and do those meals with them, but they're not able to opt into the Michigan School Meals Program. I see some questions. Do we have to opt into CEP? That is part of the legislation to opt into CEP to maximize federal reimbursement. So if you are not sure, or if you have just a couple sites or you're just over the line, please reach out to Caitlin or I so we can take a look at your application and talk through that with you. Everyone has a little bit different of a makeup, so we really need to take a look at your application and see what's going on. As far as grouping schools or picking and choosing, there's a little bit of flexibility there. What we want to do is make sure that all eligible sites, if we can get you district-wide and need to group a certain way, kind of like with that Ithaca example. If they didn't group their sites, that high school wouldn't have been eligible. So they needed to group. But if you want to group strategically, like maybe having your elementaries at a higher reimbursement and your middle and high school at a lower, but everyone's eligible and participating, that's okay. I'm getting a great variety of questions. Thank you everyone for your participation in this.
Natalie, I did mark to answer live, and this is not specifically CEP, but it was an application question that I wasn't positive how to answer. But it was just a level 4, level 5 kind of a thing. So I didn't know if you wanted to read through that really quick and see what help you could offer for that.
Okay, so no one in your district has level 5 access. If you have a new superintendent or a new business manager, that person is going to need to get set up with Nexus first before a new level 4 can be assigned. If you are assigned, you should be able to do that piece. A level 4 who was in last year's application, if you rolled forward that application, you should still have access. If you did not roll forward the application and you said don't roll it forward, have a blank one, and everything was blank, that would have cut off your access, I think, because it didn't connect it to last year's app. So a good question. If we do CEP this year, do we have to stay in it for full 4 years? No, you don't. So I realize, especially with those really low percentages, you're opting into Michigan School Meals because you have that extra matched amount. And it might not be financially viable for you to do that in the future. If Michigan School Meals weren't to continue next year, you don't have to stay in the program. You can opt out of CEP. In the same way that you're not locked in and you can reapply for a higher reimbursement. So there's flexibility with that. This window to apply for CEP is during the summer, and then your percentage stays the same for the school year. So what we don't do is, hey, it's November now, has our eligibility increased? Can I reapply? The percentage that you start with is based on that April enrollment and eligibility, and that's what carries on for the school year. I can show the CEP application again. Is there something specific that you would like to see?
Hey, Natalie, while that's coming in, we did have a question that said, would preschool having students that are 3 and ones that are eligible be able to do both CACFP and CEP, or would the entire preschool have to do CACFP? We're going to be having more information come out about preschool and claiming and either CACFP or if it's eligible for Michigan School Meals. We've had a ton of questions come in. We're working with our CACFP team. So please be on the lookout for that. We don't have all the answers yet as we try to work through everything and what will work in the claim and what programming is what. because we do have the pre-K age group, but we know there is commingling that happens. But just be patient, and we will have some more information coming out hopefully soon for you.
All right. I'm going to put in my email for this other question. I'm not sure if it's about the CEP application or actually I'm going to put our emails back up.
Yeah, I think it's about the Michigan, the application for summer EBT and
Okay.
education benefits for Michigan school meals, as opposed to the education benefit form that's for CEP. I think that's what it's about, but feel free to email. If you want to email Natalie or Sarah or we can all help you with that question, but I think that's what it is. Or if you mean the CEP form that's now called the education benefits form, but you have the one that says household information report.
So if you are using, some people use the household size and income household information report every year. If you used that and distribute it, that's okay. You don't need to collect new forms, replace them, and do new benefits. We've just updated that, as you know, some people said the name wasn't very helpful. So if it's that one where people enter in their household size and income, that's okay to use. The one with the annual income ranges gets updated every year, so you want to make sure you're using the correct one. Yes, families can do an education benefit form online if your district's able to set that up. I'd assume, I'm not sure what family portal is, but if you have a structure on there that is able to collect a signature and is a secure transaction of information, that's absolutely okay. That streams everything nicely into your systems and makes it easier for state reporting. If you have extended benefit students, I didn't really get a chance to talk about that here. Please email me and we'll take a look at your application and I can guide you through what documentation we would need. You can't just put numbers in the application without doing an upload of supporting documentation. So I can take a look at what your percentage is, how much we might need to get you into that eligible range, and make sure we're both using our time efficiently here as we get close to school. Okay, so with that, it's 4:03. Thank you everyone so much for calling in late in your day, probably after your work hours, attending both of our webinars this week. We are really excited about this program and Michigan School Meals this year. Hopefully this helped ease your mind, answer some questions, and made you aware of some resources that we have to help support you as we jump into something new and exciting for our students. So thank you. Have a nice day.
Natalie?
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. If you're going to stay on, someone has their hand up. Oh, that was, okay. We already had that question.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I just noticed the hand up. So I was going to say, if we still are here and someone wants to ask a question, we could allow them to talk, but I think we'll receive an email about that one. Someone just said really excited, very confused. That I feel like that's appropriate and that's okay.
Yeah,
we will help you through this. Feel free to reach out. Your analysts, any of us, we are happy to help, but our goal really is anyone we can get district-wide CEP is number one. Beyond that, maybe half the buildings, we would love to work with you. So, and even if you're not CEP at all and you're not eligible, that's okay too. We can explain kind of the best process to collect applications and try to make it as less confusing as possible.